She sold out a stadium, ran on empty for 9 days, and then the clock finally caught up with her. Her ankle was taped. Her legs had almost nothing left. She hadn't slept properly in over a week. And she still walked out in front of a sold-out crowd that genuinely believed she could not lose. Then, in just 73 minutes, the fairy tale hit a wall. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why it happened, because the answer was never really about who was the better player that day. It was about something almost nobody watching noticed until it was already too late. Stay with me here, because this is not just a story about a loss. This is a story about what happens when a 21-year-old runs an entire tournament on adrenaline and crowd noise instead of rest, and what happens the moment that fuel finally runs out. If stories like this get to you the way they get to me, hit subscribe now, because there is a very real chance her comeback starts again in just a few days, and you are going to want to already be here when it does. Let's rebuild exactly how we got to this point, because none of this makes sense without the 2 weeks that came before it. 10 days earlier, Eala walked into the biggest final of her career against world number 3 Jessica Pegula, on American soil, in the American capital. She dropped the first set. She won the second. And then, in the third set of the biggest match of her life, she did not grind it out. She ran away with it, 6-0, and became the first player from the Philippines in history to win a WTA Tour-level title. She did not go home to celebrate. She got on a plane to Toronto and kept playing. Within days she was back on court, chasing a completely different kind of history in front of a completely different crowd, one that had shown up specifically entirely for her. Here is where it started to get dangerous. In her opening rounds in Toronto, Eala was dragged into 3-set battle after 3-set battle. She survived Alicia Parks in 3 sets. Then, in the third round, she survived an even tougher test against American Katie McNally, a match that stretched to 2 hours and 39 minutes. Somewhere in the middle of that match, Eala rolled her right foot going for a ball. She did not stop. She got it taped and kept playing, even breaking serve afterward, and she eventually won that match through sheer will, 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. That win extended her winning streak to 7 matches in a row, the longest of her career. It also meant she had now played back-to-back extended 3-setters, on top of a title run the week before, on top of a foot injury she was still carrying. Every single fact was pointing toward one outcome. Exhaustion was coming. The only question left was when it would show up, and against who. The answer was Belinda Bencic. Understand exactly who was standing across the net for that 4th-round match. Bencic is 29 years old, an Olympic gold medalist from the Tokyo Games, a former world number 4, and the champion of this exact tournament all the way back in 2015, when she beat Serena Williams and Simona Halep to win it. This was not a name to underestimate. This was a player who has spent over a decade learning exactly how to find the cracks in a tired opponent. And here is the detail that made this whole matchup impossible to predict from a stat sheet. These two had never played each other. Not once. Not as juniors, not in qualifying, not in an exhibition, nowhere. Zero history. Zero blueprint for how the other one behaves when the stakes are highest. So what actually happened when the ball finally got struck? It started well enough. Eala held her opening service game comfortably, but cracks showed almost immediately. She dropped her first service game with a pair of costly double faults, and Bencic pounced to grab an early lead. The two traded a flurry of early breaks, both players finding their range, and Eala actually managed to level things back up at 4 games apiece, clawing her way back into the set the way she had all week. For a few minutes, it looked like the streak might survive one more day. Didn't. Bencic broke again to close out the first set 6-4. And then the second set is where the fatigue that had been building for 9 straight days finally arrived all at once. Bencic broke immediately in the opening game, broke again to open up a 3-love lead, and simply never let go. She won the entire second set, 6-0, completing what tennis calls a bagel, a set in which the opponent does not win a single game. The whole match was over in just 1 hour and 13 minutes. Compare that to the 2 hours and 39 minutes it took Eala to survive McNally 2 nights earlier. This was not a war of attrition. This was a much fresher, far more experienced player closing the door quickly, before the crowd noise could ever build into the kind of chaos that had carried Eala through her earlier rounds. And the numbers back up exactly what your eyes were telling you. Across the whole match, Bencic won nearly 58% of the points on her return. Eala managed barely 35% on hers. That gap right there, more than any single shot, tells you who was in control of that court from start to finish. Here is the part almost nobody talking about this match afterward properly connected. Eala had broken Bencic twice in that first set alone. Twice. This was not a player who folded quietly. She had her chances. She simply did not have enough left in her legs to convert those chances into anything more than a temporary rally. A 21-year-old body can only recover so many times inside 9 days of playing at this level, and eventually, no amount of heart closes that gap. So here is the question worth sitting with for a second. Was this a collapse? Or was this simply the bill finally arriving for 2 of the most demanding weeks of anyone's season? Because remember what came before this match. A maiden tour title. A 3-set survival act against Parks. A 3-set war against McNally with a rolled ankle in the middle of it. 8 matches inside a little over a week, if you count doubles. Bencic, meanwhile, arrived into this match as fresh as a 29-year-old former top 4 player can be, with a game built entirely around calm, controlled footwork designed to lower the temperature of a rally until the other side cracks under the pressure of simply having to keep going. That is exactly what happened here. And it is worth saying clearly because I think it gets lost in every recap that just prints the scoreline. This was never really about who the better tennis player was that day. Across their careers, statistically, these two are close enough that no algorithm could separate them with confidence. What decided this match was biology. 9 days of accumulated fatigue against a body that had 11 more years of learning exactly how to manage a long physical season. Now here is where this story becomes more than a scoreline, and it is the reason I wanted to make this video instead of just reading you a result. After the match, Bencic was asked directly about the crowd, the one that had turned every Eala match in Toronto into something closer to a home Grand Slam final than a 4th-round tie. She did not dismiss it. She talked about preparing specifically for a left-handed opponent, about solving the mirrored spins and angles that make a lefty like Eala so different to play, and about settling into her own rhythm despite the noise around her. It was, in its own way, a form of respect. She had walked into a building built entirely around someone else's history, and she had to be good enough and calm enough to beat both the player and the atmosphere at the same time. And Eala, in defeat, did something that tells you exactly why so many people across the sport have fallen in love with her these past 2 weeks. She said the loss stung, of course it did, but she called the last 2 weeks a huge positive overall, said she had pushed through obstacle after obstacle, and reminded everyone listening that she was, above everything else, healthy and grateful for that. She then turned, in her own language, and spoke directly to the Filipino fans who had followed her from Washington all the way to Toronto, thanking them for everything they had given her that week and every week before it. That is not the reaction of someone who sees this as an ending. That is the reaction of someone who already knows this is a chapter, not the whole book. So where does this actually leave her? She arrives at her next tournament, the Cincinnati Open, at a career-best position in the race toward the season-ending tour finals, something that would have sounded like a joke to suggest just 6 months ago. It does not sound like a joke anymore. She is taking a couple of days to actually rest this time, real rest, before stepping back onto a court again. And here is the real question worth sitting with as this video ends. If a 21-year-old can win her first tour title, survive back-to-back 3-set wars on a taped ankle, sell out a 10,000-seat stadium for a 4th-round match, and still only lose to a former Olympic champion once her body finally ran out of gas after 9 straight days, what does she look like the next time she walks into a tournament actually rested? Drop your prediction below for how she responds in Cincinnati. Not just win or lose, tell me how far you think this run actually goes once the fatigue is gone and it is just her tennis against the rest of the draw. I will be back the moment that answer starts to take shape.